And we're live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Corey Bodzin, who is the Chief Technology Officer for deepwatch and also a culinary nerd at mealtime. So,
That is absolutely right. Hey, thanks for having me, David.
yeah, no
Pleasure to
problem.
be
And this conversation is totally unscripted. We've talked in the past. You strike me like a person that people want to talk to because you have a very dynamic personality, despite the fact that you are a technology nerd, or maybe with the fact that you're a technology nerd.
Well, I'm a huge fan of talking about food and economics and science fiction. So it turns out that those are topics people love to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
This computer security is fun too, but as you
Absolutely.
can see, right, my passions may lie elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll zoom in on you in a second. So before we get started, so look, I looked at your background and you have an amazing track record to pick some winners in the information security space, or the kind of the cybersecurity space. So RSA, Qualys, Tenable, and then now deepwatch or ExtraHop as well, and now deepwatch. So really, great brand names, success stories, and so on. So, but people probably would love to hear, like, how did you get started? What was kind of your first role? And I noticed that you dabble a little bit in space engineering, aerospace engineering as well, as you can see from the background over there. So how did you end up in cybersecurity?
So I have a very 80s and 90s maybe story to tell here. I'll try to keep it concise. I actually started in aerospace engineering at University of Michigan. Got a chance to intern at NASA. Realized I'd rather pluck my eyes out than do that as a job. A summer of subsonic and supersonic airfoil design made me realize it's not a thing for me. And so
But hold on,
I
isn't
go ahead.
NASA cool? Like I've seen everybody wearing these T-shirts.
NASA is cool, and I admire all the people who work for NASA. Um, Programming Fortran, yes, I'm that old, to get data on what the airfoil was doing at Mach 2 speeds, not as exciting. And, I was an intern, and at the end of the summer, they had a party for us interns who were leaving, and somebody said, "So what'd you think?" And I said, "Oh, it was kind of boring. I was by myself, but I get it. I'm an intern. I just do the grunt work." And he looked at me and he said, "This is exactly what your job will be." And so that
No
was,
way.
I said, "Okay, thank you. That's fantastic." Promptly switched my major to Russian history. Went out to Arizona, and so I had kind of figured I was going to do something different. I always dabbled with computers since I was a teenager. Bought my first CPM machine and such. And so I had this background with BASIC. Everybody did. I was at a temp job and looking over the shoulder of a contract programmer who came into this company once a month and would, have a list this long of things to fix and would get one done and leave. I was looking over his shoulder and was using an Alpha Micro mini computer. And I looked at it and I said, "Wow, that's BASIC. I know how to do that." And the owner of the company, or president of the company, Fred Sternfeld, looked at me and he said, "You know how to do that? How'd you like a job?" And boom, right? That's how I got into IT. Towards the tail end, so a small biochemical company, Research Organics in Cleveland. Towards the tail end of that, this was 1993, 94-ish, got us hooked up with the T1, got us on the internet. And as I was getting ready to hang up with the telco guy, he said, "By the way, now that you're connected, you might want to consider a firewall," something I'd never heard of before. And that was how I got into information security. And, one thing leads to another, but a passion for tinkering around with computers and very much a traditional kind of security hacker mindset of really enjoying thinking about both how things work, but also how you can make them break is really what kind of drove me to where I ended up with today. I've spent the last 10 years on the product side, which adds another twist of not just how do things work, how do things break, but also how can you make customers' lives better. Let me hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, I hear that as a common theme, among security professionals, the fact that there is this desire to tinker around and understand things. So because a lot of it is self-learning, even though you have academic background, kind of similar to mine actually, but um, it's just an aptitude to learn, but it's all about what do you do from there? How do you get that knowledge and basically be a self learner? So what happened when that person from telco mentioned firewalls? What was kind of your next reaction? How did you deploy like the first? What was your? Do you remember? Was it first firewall?
Yeah, well, so we had some flavor of a Cisco 2500, and I quickly realized that it at least had some minimal IP filtering and blocking capabilities. So I fired that up and started reading. Learned that I wanted to only allow certain types of traffic. Learned that great SQL to or that internet to Microsoft SQL Server gateway I had written was probably a horrifically bad idea to let the internet directly in. So blocked that off, figured things out. I went from that job to a true IT job where I was on the Windows administration team at a company called the AG Communication Systems, a Lucent subsidiary. But really quickly, because I like tinkering, found myself spending time on our Bay Networks gear and our Cisco gear, and kind of looking over the shoulder of our firewall admin on Checkpoint One, and said, "Oh yeah, this looks a lot like what I was doing with the Cisco, commands, just a lot prettier and a lot more powerful." And so that's how I ended up with firewalls and starting security. But it was always, to your point, David, I mean, it was, well, gosh, this guy said firewall. He says it's a good idea. Let me go see what I can learn about it. Learning was a little bit different in 93, 94. You went and found an O'Reilly book as opposed to Googling something. But otherwise, same process you do today.
Yeah, it's a much easier today, but it's funny. It's still deny all. There's no difference. Nothing's changed.
It depends, right? I mean, the security side of me wanted to deny all, but starting on it, I was on the IT sysadmin side, so I had to allow everything rule to start with.
So, Corey, I want to dabble into product management. Because you have such a vast experience in that. As you mentioned, you kind of move to that, and it's such a complex and complicated area. I think a lot of times people see that as almost an enigma. Because so let's start with that. Let's start with like what is kind of product management and how does it relate specifically when we're talking about kind of cybersecurity products.
That's a great question. And especially, I think, in the realm of cybersecurity, I learned much of what I know about product management. I had the luxury of spending some time in a company called Encircle. It was later acquired by Tripwire, but it was a great time. And one of my peers was a gentleman named Mark Wood, who I still try to meet with at RSA every year. He was the one who really taught me a lot about what good product management look like and introduced me to things like the pragmatic marketing framework to really help narrow that down. I came into product management with a view I think is really common among people who maybe don't do product management, of thinking that a product manager is kind of the dictator of the products. Maybe that's what you try to be when you're first starting. I know I tried to do that once or twice, but I really quickly learned that ultimately being a product manager is being a servant of the customer. And the way that you do that is by paying attention to what your customers say, what they actually do, and really taking the time to observe the things they deal with. And that was, that for me has been something for the last, gosh, more than a decade now as I've been doing this. I always remember something. It wasn't the first time it was said. It was the first time I heard it was when Philippe Courteau said to me, 2 ears, one mouth, use them in that proportion. And that's incredibly true of product management, is actually listening, and not just listening to what people say they want, but thinking about what does that mean they need.
Now, I'm going to challenge that a little bit. on purpose, right? And again, this is all unscripted. It's just so you guys know. Um, so do customers always know what they want? Because Henry Ford once said, okay, people wanted faster horses at the
Hmm.
time,
Yes.
and then they designed a car. And what's the case in cybersecurity?
No, I think that's true of product management in general, but especially true in cybersecurity. You're absolutely right. Customers, when they talk to you, they will tell you what they want. The job of the product manager is to understand what they need. And so that apocryphal story is a great example. Um, I would firmly believe that people go to Ford and say, I want a faster horse. But when you listen to that want and you say what they're really asking about is how do I get from point A to point B more efficiently, more quickly, with less of the ancillary costs of maintaining a beast of burden and feeding them, that's when you start thinking about this is what they're actually asking for. And that is so central, especially in cybersecurity. There's so many really great products that do a very small slice of things. And people often get really wound up in a very specific activity because it's the way they've always done it, or because they know of products that work in a specific way, that you have to spend extra time really listening hard to what they're asking for. I'm a huge believer of employing mechanisms like asking the 5 whys to really drill down from that top level of here's what I want to understanding here's what they actually need to
Yes.
make things better.
So this is fascinating. So how do you then? It's so hard to sometimes figure out, how to synthesize, like, the question that they or the wants, and synthesize into something that's applicable, that you can actually take away and create. Because again, there's a gap. They think they want something, again, from go faster from point A to point B, but the question is, did they need to stop along the way? Is there need to pick something up? Is there? I mean, there's a million different ways to look at that. So, how do you, from your experience, how do you take those answers and make sense of them in the terms that you can create, go out and create action and create a product around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you said earlier that I had done a good job of picking winners. Maybe the way I would actually say is I've been incredibly fortunate to be a member of some incredible companies. And in this particular case, my time at RSA, I worked with a UX designer, Elliot, who really opened my eyes to how you do that, and the power of using visuals. There's a book called Back of the Napkin that talks about the power of just sketching something, getting down a picture, because it really helps illustrate and drive a conversation out of wants and into needs. And Elliot taught me that that's an actual discipline that somebody who's really good with user experience can drive out. Especially when they're partnered with a product manager who knows how to keep asking questions, and an engineer who can really think about the realm of possibility, but also the realm of innovation. So there are a lot of things you do. At the end of the day, you can simplify it by saying you just spend a lot of time asking questions and really writing down what you're hearing and then asking questions based on what you heard. But that's oversimplifying a little bit. Being able to bring a picture, bring a visual, actual be in a room and flowchart things out. These are the kind of things that are really great. And honestly, I can tell you, I'm so relieved to be able to be back on the road a little bit and having those one-on-one whiteboard interactions with customers that help you understand here's really what they're talking about, here's what their pain point is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and now I'm going to peel the onion a little bit more on that. And again, you're doing a great job. These unscripted questions are not easy. So, Corey, thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the political question. I have to
No,
dodge.
actually, no. I like the technology side, and maybe we can go political afterwards. We'll see. Well, maybe we'll go political after we start talking about pizzas.
There you go.
But so here's the question. So, they say customers say, okay, let's, coming back to the example, let's go faster. I want to go faster from point A to point B. And then you go back and say, well, we can go this fast. And then you come back to the customer and says, but it's going to cost you X dollars. it's going to cost you a lot of money. And they come back and say, oh, hold on for a second. I don't really want to go that fast. I'm okay at half speed because, so how do you juggle between, what the customer really want, and then how much you're willing to pay for it? Because I think that is kind of the magic behind product management and beyond and around prioritizing what features and benefits to create in the kind of the next release.
That's right. And I'm going to abstract that a little because pricing is a discipline all of its own. So
Right.
how much somebody will pay for it, there are whole volumes of information that I've tried to consume and volumes I've not yet gotten to. But the underlying fundamental of, is it useful, right? Because that's really, if something is useful and creates value, then figuring out how to price it becomes a lot easier. But it's really hard. And it's hard in human communication, right? I'm gonna cut to my first culinary analogy here, but it's true.
Do it.
I
was
make.
Surprised it took this long, Corey.
Yeah, no kidding. One of the things I really enjoy making is I make Spanish rice or paella, both very similar, and my family enjoys it, but it's really hard. There are a lot of interesting flavors that you don't always run into, like saffron and what kind of meats I include and how long you actually toast the rice for. And there are a lot of variables like that it's hard for my wife to say, I really like that you doubled the amount of saffron you used. She does not, and my kids do not have that sort of specificity. They say instead, I don't know, it tastes good, tastes bad. And so what I do, and I did this over years to a point where I've got it pretty refined, is every time I would make it, I would make a small adjustment. And I would say, is it better, is it worse, right? I can get that sort of objective understanding. In software development, we try to do the same thing. And this is where I worked with a lady, Heidi Araya, who is an agile coach who preached this. And she is fantastic for this, explaining that the whole benefit of agile is not hearing what you think somebody does, going off in a box for 6 months, coming out and going, ta-da, and then saying, oh, it's not quite right. I don't know why, not enough salt, etc. But instead, try to get something out. Every sprint, every couple sprints at most, get a small experiment out there and see what people say. Did you like this? This time I used chicken stock instead of chicken broth, and my family enjoyed it a lot more. They really liked that, mouthfeel. And so that was an adjustment I made in the recipe. That if I'd done that with a bunch of things, just trying to hit, I want it tastier, I want this or that, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish. And so software is the same thing. We make small adjustments, we make small bets, we try to make lots of them and as quickly as possible. And then you listen and you observe what customers do with those. And when it has value, then you start figuring out, now, how do I get them to pay for it?
So it sounds like a very much iterative process, right? Where you go back and improve over time. So you do that with current customers. With future customers and prospects, they don't necessarily always, if at all, tell you what they really want. And I've seen that before. You can sit down in a meeting and go for 45 minutes or an hour, and then within an hour, all of a sudden, you get a glimpse of what is the really cardinal issue that they're trying to solve. But beforehand, you talk about so many different things. So how do you then again distill what the customer really want and have this kind of iterative process, from potentially prospects, because I also think that customers that already, are your customers, enterprise, they're already customers, want a certain type of sets of features and benefits as opposed to what will take to get new customers because you're competing and so on. It's a very kind of different feature set.
You're absolutely right. So in the case, I always like starting with existing customers, right? Existing customers, maybe if you're in a real niche market, they're not going to be representative, but odds are you've got a broad enough spectrum that your customers, they are a pretty good sample set for understanding what the market needs. And so you spend time talking with them, and sometimes they ask for things that are really specific. I had a major telecom customer who had a really specific need, and we knew it was a one-off, but they were a big customer, they're a strategic customer. And so we figured out a way to scope it just big enough to satisfy them, but small enough that we weren't making a massive investment in something we knew was never really going to have much in the way of broad market demand. That worked out great, and that's just the same process that I talked about before. They laid out, here's what we need. We spent some time understanding why they needed it, looking at the systems they wanted to integrate with. This was a tagging feature that we ended up putting in specifically for them to support their system integration. And it was great. It was a win for everybody, even if it didn't have great market applicability. But at that same company, we had a fantastic customer, Simon, out in the UK, worked for a major bank, and he kept asking us for something, and we were never quite getting it right. And so I finally, a couple of times, I got on a plane, I went out to pool in the UK, best fish and chips I've ever had, by the way, out there. And actually,
another food reference,
Another food reference. I have a picture of that. Anyhow, I didn't just listen to what he was saying because that wasn't getting the job done. I actually sat and watched over his shoulder as he used our product. And I learned things I didn't know and things he knew he was doing, but they were subconscious, right? There was a part of our UI where he always went in, he clicked, he went down, he did this. And his frustration at the top had been about role-based access control and how he needed more granular. But upon observing him, what I realized was the problem was that we had a critical function that everybody wanted to use was buried deep in a menu structure that was limited to a certain subset of users. And so by just restructuring the UI a little bit, we were able to broaden his user base. And he would not have been able to tell me that. And all those clicks that he had been using our product for years, so he just did automatically. If I hadn't been there to actually observe over his shoulder, I never would have gotten down to that. And so sometimes, especially with customers, when you watch, you start to see, wow, they do this thing. I bet everybody struggles with this out in the market. And here's something where we can make a difference and make people's lives better.
It's incredible insight, that you just provided, that you have to be able to, if all possible, to view what the customer is doing, because as you mentioned, they cannot articulate, what they were doing because they were subconsciously doing a couple of things, and almost like the speed of clicking, would not allow you to actually view it unless you were there. Now, from a feature benefits perspective, now you're dealing internally with the company, with the kind of the software engineers to go out and build it. And I'm assuming, again, that some features and benefits are easier than others to program, and some are like, there's an uphill battle. It will take so long and a lot of efforts. Again, it's like a best bang for the buck. How would you then, juggle that? So you kind of reviewed what the customer wanted, distill that, and come back to your, software development team, and now you come back with some requests, and you get some pushback on how do you then prioritize, what's the best way to take?
Yeah, that is the whole art of product management right there, is that it's not an issue of not having enough good ideas or enough things that are important to do. It's an issue of the 100 great things you could do, what are the 3 things you can and should do? And so that's hard. It's made easier when you have a pretty good discipline about letting your development team innovate. And so one of the things I'm a real firm believer in is, and this was actually, I finally found the best math for it from Jesse Rothstein, who I reported to at ExtraHop. He had put together, along with Robert, our program manager, a really good kind of mathematical way of doing this. And what we really did, we would spend some time saying, what does the PM need and why? Right? Talk about why. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the pain point for a customer? I slapped the Gherkin methodology out that I like, but figure out what they need and why, and stay away from the how. Let engineering, as you have written something, give you an idea of the level of effort. And, engineers that tend to be conservative will probably be bigger, but it gives you a basis as a product manager to then, okay, they've sized this as something really big. what can I do? How can I be far more specific? How can I get this to be a narrower scope that allows engineering to say, okay, you've removed some uncertainty. I can now more confidently say this is 3 sprints worth of work or something like that. And you get tighter. And as a product manager, your job is to make sure that you never narrow it so much that you lose broad market applicability, or you fall below what is viable. Right? I hate the term MVP. My joke is that it's always really heavy on the M and usually doesn't have enough of the V. Right? That just you've scoped it so tightly it doesn't do things anymore. I like something I
Love that.
read years ago on the internet. I read SLC, which is simple, lovable, and complete. And what ends up happening is big ideas, when you first come to them, they tend to have really big scope and they make that prioritization discussion really difficult because everything's really big and costly. When you start refining it and you get down to something that is simple but still lovable and complete, you find out they tend to be smaller amounts of work that you can, as I talked about earlier, you can get it down to be 1 or 2 sprints worth of work. And that is a small investment that you can rapidly iterate, get out to a customer sponsor and make sure it hits their needs, and not feel bad if you got it wrong because you didn't make a huge investment, and not have to push off all the other asks for forever because you're going to spend 6 months, but lets you try something, hopefully it works, and lets you move on to the next small but important thing.
SLC, I absolutely love it, Corey, and because I've used MVP a lot, and I'm going to stop as soon as this makes so much more sense to me. Now, what we hear all the time is we always hear vendors saying, "Oh, well, this is going to be the next release," and a lot of time it's not really a selling feature. Especially if they go through an RFP process or the customers are requesting something, and then the customers are actually getting smarter about this. Saying sometimes I've seen contracts where it will actually say, you have to deliver, this feature by this date, or there's consequences from a contractual perspective.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? With that today, and do you like the phrase "it's going to be in the next release," or is it do you have is this a better phrase than that?
Yeah, one of my other self-deprecating jokes is the only certain product manager answer I'll ever give you is it's not this quarter, because that's always accurate, and it's so unsatisfying. We try to be really truthful with our customers. I never like promising futures. I've been fortunate enough, both Tenable and Qualys, to move from a private to a public company. And one thing, as a private company, you don't get to make future-looking statements like that anymore without some major impact. So that was a discipline I had before, but it really instilled on me this quarter. I like to talk.
Oh, I think Corey, I'm losing you. I don't know. I don't know if it's mine.
But rather making sure that they like what they have now, and that we are truly partnering with them on where we're headed, and that we'll know when we can put things on the roadmap. And here's what we're working on this quarter. And here's when we'll be planning for next quarter, and we're happy to. Now, having said that, it's hard, right? Because no product is perfect. There are always more things you could add. You're always limited by time and resources. And so this is where, if you're really focusing on making sure you're adding value, you find that customers are willing to accept we have a roadmap, here's where we're thinking, and your idea is good, we just don't know where it's going to fall or when it's going to fall. I've been at companies where we didn't have that same level of rigor, or we didn't have that level of quality with product, and that's a lot harder because you put your sales team in a really hard position if the things you have today are incomplete or unsatisfactory.
Now, Corey, I think your I don't know. I think your headset got disconnected. I don't know if you were check the settings on here. That's what happened when you have a live broadcast, because your audio went off a little bit. Just say something.
Am I back?
It still sounds like it's not from the headset. It sounds like there's another area. Yeah, it went to say something.
We'll go to the good old wired. How's this?
Oh, it's so much better. Thank you for that. So I think it went from the other headset to this one. That's why I could hear you faintly. But this is perfect. So thank you for that. So and I have another question from so you don't live in a bubble in a sense that you work for companies. Even today, you pick the winners, but there are a lot of losers and there are a lot of noise in the marketplace. How do you then juggle like the kind of the environment and look at what's out there from other competing products? And do you do that? Do you like how much information exchange or feature exchange is done between product managers out there? Is it something that's occurring? I almost feel like some product managers they download the data sheets of their competitor and they look, okay, this we got, this we're gonna have. So how much is that is actually done? Because a lot of products are, they're very similar. It's so tough for customers to differentiate between them.
There are, right? And if your product is not really differentiated, I would posit you're doing something wrong to begin with. I'm a huge believer in a really intuitive and beautiful UX as a key differentiator, and of course a focus on customer value. But I've, especially earlier in my career, I've been the kind of person who downloaded other data sheets, used other products, said, "Ooh, we got to build that." And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with being occasionally a fast follower, especially when you see something that the other company has that works really well. I did, again, to the notion of I've been lucky to have some really good employers. I had the privilege of working for Dave Cole at Tenable. He's now at OpenRaven, and one of our first interactions, I was showing him some things that we were doing to close some competitive gaps we had with our key competition. And I had their screens and I had some things up, and he said, I get it, and you're right, this is a gap we've got to close, but I'm not wild about just parroting what other people do. Why don't we figure out why customers like it and see what we can innovate to do that? And so I think that's the right balance. As a PM, you should be aware. There's no shame in being a fast follower with a really great idea if it wasn't yours. But a lot of times, you ask those couple of whys down, when a competitor has something, you can drill down into what need are they satisfying, and you may find that their implementation is fantastic for them and their customers and their product set, but you could satisfy that same need in a much better way, doing things somewhat differently on your own. And that is where product managers have to be really good, not just at working with their dev team to make those sort of things reality, but they have to be really good at working with their selling team to be sure to differentiate. Here's why we do it differently than somebody else does and why we think this is the right way to do it. And it won't be perfect for everybody, but if you can stand by, we made these choices and we do things this way, then yeah, it's great. And if that means you copied somebody else's, sometimes it happens. I don't mind when people copy our ideas. It's flattery, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think the market is large enough to support multiple companies, but there's also the notion of almost like ankle biters. I mean, the barriers to entry today are pretty low. I mean, you can say, okay, let's take the product, reverse engineer it, develop something similar, 80% of it overseas, coming back and say, well, we're going to sell it now at half an X of the cost, and it's good enough. It's 90% of the features, not as robust as the other one, but for that price, it's good enough. So how do you deal with that? Like, it's a moving target to be competitive in this environment.
It is, and again, it depends on where in the market you're playing. Back to food. My wife just gave me for Father's Day. She gave me some Kashmiri saffron. It is incredible, and I use it very judiciously in some of the dishes. Having said that, there are some dishes I make, like a curry, where I'm purely using it for coloring, and the $5 stuff off of Amazon, it works just as well. And so it's a lot cheaper. So if you are in a market where your customer is making that curry and it doesn't really, they don't need any delicacy of flavor, there are 10,000 spices in that curry, then trying to sell the upmarket Kashmiri saffron is going to be a losing proposition. You always have to be aware of that as a product manager. If the things you're doing are really easy to replicate, there's still, you can get a small bump of first mover advantage. But if that's the only reason, it's because you're the only one who has it, it's not going to last long. If you build something that is easy to use, that works well, that enhances the value of your product and fits better with your customers' needs, those kind of things, the pure feature and function tends to be easy to replicate. That attention to detail, that ability to be seamless and intuitive, that's a lot harder. And you can really build a lasting advantage where, yeah, the competition's cheaper, but it's obvious to everybody using it that it's also not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you also communicate and deal with marketing, right? To position the product a certain way and define what the kind of the market you are after. So what is that interaction like? And do product management have product marketing, right? Typically, that's kind of sometimes they're depending on the size of the company. So how do you deal with that? And then the next question would be, you are now a chief technology officer. So I'm assuming that you have people report to you that do all of that. So what's the difference? What other responsibilities did you get now on top of everything else?
Yeah, let me start with the second question, because that's a great question. I am a chief technology officer. And so within deepwatch, for example, my areas of responsibility not only include the actual product development, software product development, but also because we're a technology-enabled services company, I don't only have a role in building out the platform, but also the services we offer and setting strategy and making sure we're doing things there. We have a research organization that does original research, security research. We've got some data scientists in there helping us to uncover all sorts of new things in our data science projects with like DGA and such. So I have a pretty broad set. And then, of course, there's also responsibilities making sure we're helping get sales enabled, building out demo environments, et cetera. So yeah, CTO is interesting. It's a really broad purview. And to your earlier comment, I get the chance to talk with other CTOs, sometimes at competitive companies, and get to learn from some of their wisdom, hopefully occasionally share some of mine. And so it's exciting to keep abreast of the things that are changing and still have a hand in building, insanely great software. Product marketing.
It sounds, before we go to about the
Sure.
the analogy for that is be like you moving from a chef that only make the sauce to now the chef that's responsible for the entire restaurant, right? That's basically what happened, right?
I love it. Yeah, a chef who does the meals maybe has some front house duties every now and then, and not above bussing the tables when it's required. So yeah, that's a good analogy. Product marketing you asked about is great, right? I have been at companies where the two were tightly combined, right? I reported to Amr Dima for a while at Qualys. Amr's a fantastic CMO, and we had product management and product marketing where it's effectively one role, right? So we did both. He was the one who taught me, only talk about benefits. If you're talking about features, you're losing. You should be talking about benefits. I've been at companies like ExtraHop, where I worked with the CMO, Bryce Hine, who was fantastic. And we had a great differentiation between product marketing and product management, two separate organizations that coordinated really closely together and made sure that product management, we were very inbound facing. We were making sure we were building the things, we were listening to customers. Product marketing, also listening to customers, but also carrying that communication with the marketplace, really extolling the benefits. As my friend Susan Roper once used the analogy, I love it. She said, product management talks about you cut up the poultry, you dredge it in flour, you put it in the 350-degree oil. Product marketing is all about saying why it's finger licking good, and it's important that you work well together to do that. So I do think product managers can't be oblivious of the needs of product marketing and being able to talk about benefits and such. also have the luxury, at many companies, deepwatch is a great example with our new CMO, Christy, of leaning on a really skilled team who knows how to write powerful prose, who knows how to make fantastic collateral, and really knows how to carry on a wonderful two-way conversation with the marketplace. As a product manager, you're missing out if you're not leveraging the expertise of your product marketing peers and learning a little bit about it. And so that's not an area that falls under my purview at Deepwatch. It's an area where I have the luxury of having a fantastic supporting peer team.
So, listen, you mentioned Deepwatch, and let's dive into that for a bit, because we're not going to do just justice if we don't. So let's talk a bit about what you guys do and what's the problem you solve, as you mentioned, and what's the secret sauce in all in one, if we can.
Sure. So Deepwatch, for those in your audience who don't know, we are an MDR, Managed Detection and Response Provider, which is, at the end of the day, we're all about making sure that you know what's happening in your networks, and that when bad things are happening, you know about them and are able to fix them quickly. Right? That's at a nutshell what we do. We're about protection and safety and making sure that people know that they can do business on the internet and not worry about getting stuck from ransomware or having their IP stolen because they didn't catch, data exfiltration. We do a lot of that. We leverage a lot of the best of breed products. We're strong partners with Splunk, with Tenable, with companies like, we're working on a great partnership right now with Tenable on making sure we're leveraging their vulnerability management, near and dear to my heart because I'm there. So we do a lot of that, but that's what we do at the end of the day is customers, companies who either have their own security operations center but need help, or are looking for a partner who can take on almost all the responsibilities of a security operations center of detection and response. We're there to help them do that. And my role as CTO, make sure our service offerings around MDR, VM, et cetera, really meet that need, and that we're building products like Deepwatch Mobile or our upcoming machine learning product to make sure that our customers have all the technology they need to see the job we're doing and to help us be a better ally of protecting their business.
Yeah, absolutely, and you did a phenomenal job again articulating that in a way that is easy to consume and understand. What's your take currently on the Kaseya, the 4th of July hack and vulnerability and breach? It's a never-ending barrage of incidents, and would deploying Deepwatch would solve that, or is it people are still going to incur these these issues, especially with supply chain? It seems like it's just I don't know how many customers Kaseya had, but it seems like such a major major way of things going right now, which is not good, not looking good at all.
Yeah, it is not good, but it's also not that new, right? Supply chain is a new term, but at the end of the day, there are just a couple of basic things that we're still working through as a people, and they're manifesting themselves in our industry. We're not great at good cybersecurity hygiene. A friend of mine at Tenable, Gavin Millard, once said that ransomware is the monetization of poor security hygiene, and he's right. There's a lot of unpatched systems. There's a lot of things that developers sometimes make mistakes. I told that story of my first internet to SQL gateway where I just took completely invalidated input from the internet and pumped it into my database. So we all do those things. Hopefully nobody does that anymore, but it's hard. There's a lot of complexity. And so as a result, we've had these tremendous advances in the last, you don't even have to go back a decade. You can go back a year, right? Before the start of COVID, there was obviously a really strong e-commerce industry, but since COVID now, on my Target app, I can get everything delivered right to the trunk of my car, and that's all technology that wasn't there before. We're seeing that level of change. That's all connected technology, and so all those things that we forgot about, that we just haven't had time to secure, or things that just inherently have some level of risk. What we're finding is criminal organizations are seeing there's money in that, and they're starting to push on that. And so Kaseya, yeah, I mean, I never want to throw anybody under the bus because them this week, but last week it was somebody else, and
Yep.
next week it'll be somebody new. There is a lot of complexity. There's a lot that we can do. So at deepwatch, we're really focused on making sure that you're exercising a certain level of due diligence with prevention. We have some tools like our patent pending maturity score to help you understand if you've really even got the visibility you need. But then we also do a lot of work on detection to make sure that when things go wrong, because they will, that you pick them up reasonably quickly. We have a lot of capability in response, not only guiding our customers, but with some of the endpoint technologies we support, even making fixes if they need us to, so that you can be resilient and clean up quickly. And you asked, where do I see it heading? I see we're going to have a mess for a while, and that's okay. The defenders will continue to improve. We'll get better at hygiene. We'll get better at timely detection. Everybody's attention is there, right? I'm old enough to remember Richard Clark talking about how most companies spent more on coffee than on cybersecurity. We're well past those days. Cybersecurity teams are funded now. Now what they're really looking for is help me understand what's impactful, what's the one thing I can do. And so at deepwatch, we try to do that. Here, there are 100 things you could do. Here's something we see works for our customer base. This will help you either not get hit or be more resilient when you do, so that it's a minor nuisance as opposed to a major problem.
And I see that every once in a while you bring in, Captain America to rescue. I saw the phone there for a second.
That's right. So again, I'm pleased. I'm fully vaccinated. I was able to make my first business trip in 15 months. Anybody who is like me and getting ready to start going back in airports again, the TSA absolutely loves this. It gets you through the checkpoints quickly. So go get one yourself. But I do love the cap anyhow.
You heard it here first, folks. We actually listen. This podcast is so packed with information, Corey. It's very much appreciated. I highly encourage you to go back and review some of the items you provided, the ideas, because it's really beneficial. So where do we go from here? Like, do you? What's the best way to reach out to you? For advice, insight on the product, mentorship. I know you bring back to the community or ask for the best, pizza recipe. We said it's not going to be gluten free.
That's right. No, I mean, so obviously at a corporate level, deepwatch, we're always there. You can go out to our website. You can even check out that maturity score I was talking about and see. I'm one of the dumbest people at this company. We have a wonderful team here. So they're great resources, and you can hit up deepwatch on all the social media outlets. You'll find me lurking around mostly LinkedIn, making, as my friend Ray once said, pithy UX observations, but also sharing a lot of food. And I made one a while back, and it was some cybersecurity, but I talked about cast iron. And I think for the next month, people were reaching out to me on LinkedIn, and we would get on the phone or email back and forth about my opinion of cast iron. So I try to be as accessible as possible. And by the way, Field Company is absolute best. That's absolutely, LinkedIn's a great place. I'm lurking around on social as well. And if you hit up deepwatch and you're interested, you can talk to me if you need to, or much smarter people that are here.
Corey, you're super modest as well. Love it. So looking forward to potentially hosting you in the future events in New York City where things are opening up. And maybe you can do the trip. I know you probably have customers in this region as well. I'd love to host you and talk a bit more about culinary things and all things security. It's been a real pleasure hosting you today. It's been super insightful. Much appreciated.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here, David. I look forward to any opportunity to come out to get some great pizza. Not that we don't have great pizza here in Phoenix, but New York, I could be convinced to come on out. So I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you again. Thanks all for watching, and looking to see you all next time. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.